To everyone in Oak Ridge, my family was the definition of perfection. You know those Christmas cards with the sparkling-eyed kids, the matching sweaters, and a golden retriever sitting obediently by the fireplace? That was us, except it was real. Or so I thought. My dad, Pastor Eli Collins, wasn't just a spiritual leader. He was the heart of our community. People called him Father Eli, even though we weren't Catholic. He counseled couples on the brink of divorce, hosted food drives, led prayer groups, and visited hospital rooms of the sick and dying, even if he didn't know them personally. Every Sunday morning, our church overflowed with people just to hear him preach. His voice had that calm authority that made you believe that everything broken could be fixed, that every sinner had a second chance. And at home, he was a doting father. I mean, he taught me how to ride a bike, how to tie a necktie for school pictures, and he read me a Bible story every night until I was too old to admit I liked them. My mom, Claire, was just as saintly. She ran the women's ministry and the local shelter. I had an older sister, Maddie, who went off to college in California, and me, Noah, the quiet, straight-A student with a decent jump shot and too much respect for rules. People envied us. And sometimes, I'd lie in bed and actually feel guilty that I had it so good. Because I knew kids at school who had parents in rehab, or dads who bailed, or moms who worked 2 jobs and still struggled to buy groceries. Me? I had 2 parents who tucked me in every night. How was I supposed to know that everything I believed was a lie? It started on a rainy Thursday. Just one of those off days. School had been canceled because of a storm warning, so I stayed home. Dad had already left early for a pastoral emergency, and Mom was out volunteering at the shelter. I was bored, wandering through the house, not really looking for anything, just existing. That's when I remembered that we were supposed to get the Christmas decorations out soon. They were always in the top of Dad's closet, way in the back. So I figured, why not be helpful? Surprise Mom. She'd probably cry from joy, honestly. I went into my parents' room, a place I rarely entered unless invited. Their room was always immaculately clean, like a hotel. I pulled over the step stool and opened the top shelf closet door. That's when I noticed a small box I'd never seen before. It was tucked behind a stack of old sweaters that hadn't been worn in years. It was a plain black showbox, no markings, no labels. And weirdly, it was heavy. Heavier than shoes should be. My curiosity was innocent at first. Maybe it was something sentimental, old letters, or childhood keepsakes. But when I opened it, I didn't find letters. I found a burner phone. It wasn't dead. It still had power. My hands trembled slightly as I turned it on. The screen lit up immediately, no password. That alone should have tipped me off. Who doesn't lock their phone? The home screen had only a few apps. No games. No camera. Just a messaging app, a contacts list, and some encrypted notes. The last text was from 2 days ago. Drops done. Cleaned it up real nice this time. You're clear for now, but they're watching you closer than ever. Lay low. And tell the kid nothing. My chest went tight. Tell the kid nothing? The contact name was just a single letter. D. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath. My stomach turned cold. I clicked into the message thread and started scrolling. What I read didn't make sense until it did. Words like shipment, cleanup, coordinates, feds, and drop zones appeared repeatedly. Photos of what looked like storage units. Money transfers. A few blurred out receipts and surveillance screenshots. Was this a joke? Some kind of prank? I dropped the phone like it had burned me. My heart pounded in my ears. There was no way this belonged to my dad. The pastor Eli Collins. The man who preached about truth, justice, redemption. The man who gave homeless guys jackets in the winter and forgave people who didn't deserve it. But the messages, the timestamps, they all lined up. Some of them were during sermons. Others late at night when he said he was out praying with members in crisis. And that last message. Tell the kid nothing. Was I the kid? I sat on the floor for what felt like hours. Every memory started to rewire itself. Every excuse. Every late night. Every time he told mom not to worry when he got calls during dinner. Every moment I trusted him, now infected with doubt. I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding. That maybe someone else had planted it. That it was a joke. A mistake. Anything. But the sickest part? A tiny voice inside me whispered, "You always knew something was off, didn't you?" I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Dad came home around midnight. I watched him through the crack of my bedroom door as he quietly took off his coat, kissed Mom on the forehead, and whispered something like, "It's all handled." I wondered what exactly was handled. I knew I couldn't confront him yet. Not without knowing more. Not without evidence. But something inside me shifted permanently that night. The man I'd looked up to my entire life wasn't who he said he was. And I was about to find out just how deep the lies went. Write my own ending. The next morning, I stared at my dad across the breakfast table like he was a stranger in someone else's skin. He smiled at me with that usual warmth, the one everyone in town trusted without question. His hair still had the faint scent of church incense, and his Bible sat by his coffee mug like always. But now, all I could see was the burner phone in that black box and the messages that read like a criminal's playbook. "How'd you sleep, buddy?" he asked casually. I swallowed hard. "Fine." He nodded and sipped his coffee. "God willing, the storm didn't cause much damage at the community center. I'll swing by after lunch to check on it." "You staying home today?" "Yeah," I mumbled. He reached over and tousled my hair like he used to when I was 10. I flinched, just a little, but I don't think he noticed. That day, I didn't leave my room. My mind spun in circles. I went back and forth between denial and rage. Maybe it's not what it looks like. Maybe he's working undercover. Maybe he's being blackmailed. Maybe he's trying to help someone. But even the most far-fetched justifications couldn't make the pieces fit. I had to know more. That night, once everyone was asleep, I snuck back into my parents' room. My hands trembled as I pulled the box out again, this time taking it back to my room and locking the door. I started going through the phone more carefully. There were nearly 60 messages between my dad and this mysterious D. All of them were coded, but the patterns were clear. Certain phrases, "clean the drop," "cash has moved," "silent witness," sounded like something out of a crime movie. But this wasn't fiction. And then I found something that made my blood run cold. A photo. It was low quality, grainy, but unmistakable. A small warehouse on the edge of town. I recognized it. It was behind the old train depot, a place we all avoided growing up because it was creepy and abandoned. Attached to the photo was a short caption. "Last night's pull. 2 crates. One with cash. One with meds. Got it done before midnight." Crates. Cash. Meds? Was he trafficking drugs? I wanted to throw up. No, that couldn't be. My dad healed people. He saved marriages, helped kids get into rehab, prayed over addicts every week in church. He preached against this exact kind of sin. I started taking screenshots of everything. I emailed them to myself and deleted the sent messages from the phone. I even backed them up on a hidden USB drive I'd use for school projects. It felt insane, like I was building a case against my own father. The next few days, I barely spoke to him. Every time he left the house, I wanted to scream, "Where are you going? WHO, are you really?" But I kept it in. I watched. And I waited. Then one night, I followed him. He said he had an emergency at the women's shelter. A last-minute crisis. I waited 10 minutes. Then I grabbed my bike and followed at a distance. He didn't go to the shelter. He drove right past it, down Route 18 toward the industrial area that bordered our town, the place with the warehouse from the photo. I kept to the shadows, heart pounding, every part of me screaming to turn around. But I had to know. I couldn't live another day pretending nothing was wrong. When he pulled into the lot behind the warehouse, I ducked behind a dumpster and watched. A black SUV was already parked there. Two men stepped out. One of them was tall and bald, the other wearing a beanie and gloves. My dad stepped out of his car and walked toward them with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. They didn't shake hands. They exchanged something. I couldn't tell what, but then one of the men handed my dad a thick envelope. He opened it, nodded, and slid it into his coat. That wasn't charity work. That wasn't a prayer meeting. That was a deal. My stomach dropped. I pulled out my phone and snapped a few photos, hands trembling. I knew if I got caught, it'd be over. But somehow, I got away unseen. I rode home in the dark, my mind racing, a sick twist of betrayal lodged deep in my chest. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. My father, the man everyone in town worshipped, was living a double life. And I had proof. But what was I supposed to do with it? Back home, I didn't sleep. Again. The next morning, I skipped school. I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to start. There was one person who'd know how deep this went. My sister Maddie. She was always the sharper one. She and Dad had drifted apart during her senior year, just before she left for college. I'd never understood why. She said he'd gotten weird, but never explained more. I called her. Hey, wow, a call? What's the occasion? She answered cheerfully. Maddie, I said, my voice shaking. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay. Why did you stop talking to Dad? There was a pause. Where's this coming from? She asked. I found something. On his phone. He's doing things. Illegal things. He lied to all of us. I followed him last night. He met with some guys at a warehouse. I have pictures. There was silence on the line. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold. You found the phone, didn't you? My blood turned to ice. What? She sighed. I tried to tell Mom years ago. She wouldn't believe me. Said I was confused. Said Dad would never. But I knew. I saw things. Late night calls. Bags of cash. Once I found a ledger with initials and numbers. I confronted him. He told me I misunderstood and that I needed to pray for clarity. The next week, he put it all in a locked box. That's when I knew I couldn't stay. Tears welled in my eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was trying to protect you. You were still just a kid. And honestly, part of me hoped I was wrong. That he'd change. But he didn't. I whispered. No, she said. He didn't. I sat on my bed, the truth sinking in deeper than ever before. The man I'd admired my entire life. The man who told me to live righteously. The man who baptized children and comforted widows. Was living a life of lies, deals, and darkness. And I had no idea how many more secrets were still buried. But I was done pretending. If I had to burn the whole image down to protect the people he was hurting, then so be it. I was going to find out the whole truth, no matter what it cost. After that call with Maddie, something shifted inside me. It was like a final wall collapsed, and I could no longer lie to myself or protect him. I spent my whole life believing my dad was a man of God, a moral compass not just for our family, but for the entire town. Now, it felt like I was waking up inside a nightmare I didn't know I'd been living in. I barely spoke to my parents that weekend. My mom thought I was sick. I told her I had a cold and locked myself in my room. But the truth was, I was obsessed. I kept replaying the warehouse scene in my head. I kept staring at the photos I'd taken. I even created a new folder on my computer titled Truth Archive and started compiling everything, screenshots, voice memos, maps of locations I saw mentioned in the texts. But it still wasn't enough. I knew there was more. Maddie had mentioned a ledger. A list. Something with initials and numbers. If it still existed, I had to find it. And I had an idea where it might be. The basement. Ours was half finished, part storage, part old furniture and church donation overflow. Most of the stuff down there hadn't been touched in years. But my dad had a filing cabinet down there with a lock. I always assumed it was church tax forms or boring adult documents. But now I knew better than to assume anything. Late that night, after my parents went to bed, I crept downstairs with a flashlight and the smallest screwdriver I could find. The cabinet sat in the far corner, half covered by an old moving blanket. I pulled it back slowly, heart racing. The top two drawers weren't locked. Just papers, tax forms, sermon notes. But the bottom drawer had a padlock, small, rusted, but still secure. I jammed the screwdriver into the lock and twisted gently, then harder. After a few minutes of sweat and quiet cursing, the lock snapped. I opened the drawer. There it was. A black leather-bound book. No title. Just a faded gold clasp. I opened it and immediately saw names. Dozens of them. Some I recognized. Some I didn't. Beside each name were dates, locations, codes like P or D, and numbers, thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands. Some names had been crossed out in red ink. Others had stars next to them. It was a list of transactions, of people, of victims. This wasn't just drug running. It was an entire operation. Laundering, bribery, possibly even blackmail. The codes were hard to crack, but some entries had notes like, met at sunrise, spook, paid extra for silence, use Route 7 for next drop, watch traffic cams, church funds disguised in tithe ledger. That last one nearly broke me. He was funneling crime money through the church, through God's house. I couldn't believe it. I physically couldn't believe it. But it was right there in my hands. The same place where I'd once lit candles, where I'd been baptized, where I helped set up chairs for communion, had been used as a front for something criminal and deeply corrupt. It wasn't just my dad. It was the whole image, the whole illusion, the perfect family, the holy man, all of it, propaganda, set dressing to hide something sick and selfish underneath. I took photos of every page, all 74 of them. Some had doodles in the margins. Some were so stained I could barely make them out. But I got them all. Then I noticed a folded paper in the back pocket of the ledger. A list of phone numbers. Unmarked. No names. Just digits. And written across the top in bold red ink. For when it all comes crashing down. The next morning, I almost confronted him. I was this close. He was sitting in the kitchen, sipping coffee, reading the Bible, like nothing was wrong. Like he wasn't laundering drug money and lying to the entire town. I stood in the hallway, staring at him through the doorway. Every muscle in my body was tight. I had the USB in my hand, the ledger photos backed up and organized. I could have dropped it all on the table. Exposed him. Demanded the truth. But something stopped me. It was the look on his face. Peaceful. Calm. He looked like he really believed he was doing the right thing. And that terrified me more than anything. I didn't know if he was a criminal who was pretending to be a pastor, or a pastor who had convinced himself he wasn't a criminal. And if he believed the lie, what was he capable of doing to protect it? I went back upstairs. And I called Maddie again. Hey, she answered. You okay? No, I said. But I found the ledger. You were right. About everything. She went quiet. Then whispered. Oh my God. There's a list. Of names. Transactions. It's worse than we thought. I don't think this is just about money or drugs. I think he's running something bigger. Maybe with other people in town. You think it's a network? She asked. I think it's organized. And I think the church is just one piece. We were both silent for a moment. Then she said something I'll never forget. You need to get out of there, Noah. What? I mean it. If he finds out what you know, you're not safe. I wanted to argue, to say he's still our dad. But that phrase had lost all meaning now. I'll figure something out, I said. Just don't tell Mom yet. Not until I'm sure who else is involved. Because that was the scariest thought of all. What if it wasn't just him? What if Mom knew? What if the entire church board knew? Suddenly, I didn't just feel betrayed. I felt trapped. Like I was sitting in the middle of a giant lie, and everyone was in on it except me. But not for long. I was going to pull every thread until the whole thing unraveled, even if it meant destroying everything we'd ever built. The next Sunday morning felt surreal. I stood in the sanctuary with my mom, wearing a collared shirt, shaking hands with smiling church members who had no idea what was happening behind closed doors. They patted my dad on the back, called him anointed, a blessing, a light in this dark world. He nodded humbly, quoting scripture, hugging widows, praying with the sick. I couldn't breathe. The place smelled like fresh flowers and old wood polish, just like always, but to me, it reeked of rot. I looked around the congregation and wondered how many of them were on the list. How many had received hush money? How many knew? When Dad stepped up to the pulpit and opened his Bible, I stared at his face like it was a mask. His voice filled the room, smooth, confident, gentle, and everyone leaned in. Today, we talk about truth. John 8:32 says, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." I almost laughed. You have no idea, I thought. His sermon was passionate, poetic, even. He told a story about a man who strayed but returned. A man redeemed. People wept. Someone shouted, "Amen." I wanted to scream. They don't know you're laundering drug money and blackmailing people behind the altar you're preaching from. I left before the service ended. I couldn't take it anymore. Back home, I called Maddie again. Something's happening, I told her. He gave a sermon about truth, about coming back from sin. It sounded like he was preparing us. Like he knows something's coming. Maddie was quiet for a long time. Noah, you need to go to the police. I don't know if I can, I whispered. What if they're in on it too? What if he has dirt on them? She took a shaky breath. Then we go higher. There are state-level investigators. Even the FBI. You have to make a formal report. You have evidence. I know. Mom. What about her? What if she's innocent? Noah, I'm going to ask you something. And I need you to answer honestly. I hesitated. Okay. Do you think Mom's really in the dark? Or does she just pretend to be? That question haunted me for the rest of the day. That night, after Mom went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the porch steps, my head in my hands, everything spinning. And then the porch light flicked on. It was Dad. He stepped outside, holding 2 mugs of tea. Saw your light on, he said casually. Thought I'd join you. I tensed. He handed me a mug and sat beside me. We sipped in silence for a minute, crickets chirping in the distance. Then he said, "You've been quiet lately." I said nothing. You've always been a curious kid. Always asking questions. Reading ahead. I used to think you'd grow up to be a lawyer. I forced a chuckle. Yeah, well, things change. He looked at me. You ever find something you weren't supposed to? My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He sipped his tea, eyes on the dark yard. This world's full of shadows, Noah. Sometimes, people get too close to them. Sometimes, people confuse good intentions with bad outcomes. I stayed silent. He turned to me, his expression unreadable. Just know, no one is ever the villain in their own story. We all have reasons for what we do. And not everything is as simple as black and white. I nodded slowly. I guess I'm just starting to see that. He smiled. But there was something cold in his eyes. Something that said, I know. I barely slept that night. He was warning me, testing me, and threatening me. The next morning, I left town. I told my mom I was visiting Maddie for a few days. She seemed confused but didn't press. Dad gave me a long hug, said, "Be safe. We'll talk more when you get back." I drove 6 hours straight to Maddie's apartment in Atlanta. When I arrived, I showed her everything: the USB drive, the ledger photos, the texts, the warehouse pictures. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through them. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You weren't exaggerating. This is massive." I know. We spent hours organizing it all, creating duplicates. She knew someone, a former classmate of hers who worked with a nonprofit legal watchdog group. She reached out immediately. By the next morning, we had a meeting set up with an attorney who specialized in whistleblower cases. I felt sick the entire drive, like I was betraying my family, like I was breaking something that could never be fixed. But it had to be done. The attorney was calm, professional, and horrified by what we showed her. "You did the right thing coming here," she said. "This isn't just illegal, it's a full-blown conspiracy. And if the evidence is valid, your father could face federal charges. Possibly others too." I nodded, my hands shaking. "What happens next?" Maddie asked. "We send this to the appropriate authorities," the lawyer said. Quietly. "We don't make noise yet. Let them do the digging. The more they find on their own, the stronger the case." "What about my mom?" I asked softly. The lawyer paused. "We won't touch her, for now. But if she knew and didn't act." I nodded slowly. Deep down, I already knew the answer. That night, Maddie and I sat in silence, watching an old childhood home video. We were kids, playing in the yard, Dad filming us with a big clunky camera. He laughed behind the lens, told us to smile, told us to wave to the future. I wanted to throw up. "I miss who he pretended to be," I whispered. Maddie wiped her eyes. "Me too." The next few days were a blur. Emails, legal forms, interviews. The nonprofit took our case seriously. They assigned us a liaison. The authorities were notified. Quiet investigations began. And then, something terrifying happened. Our house burned down. The call came at 2:14 a.m. Maddie shook me awake, holding her phone, her face pale in the glow of the screen. "Noah," she whispered, your house is on fire." At first, I thought I was dreaming. Then I saw the footage. Someone had already posted a video to Facebook. Our family home in flames. Fire trucks lined the street, hoses spraying. A neighbor was screaming. There was an explosion. The whole back of the house just blew out. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I just sat there and watched it burn from hundreds of miles away, like it wasn't even real. I called my mom immediately. No answer. Then I called again, and again. Finally, on the fourth try, she picked up. Her voice was raw, coughing, frantic. "Noah." "Oh my God. Thank God. Are you okay?" "Me?" I shouted. "You're the one in the burning house. Are you okay?" "I'm fine." I was out, visiting Aunt Carol. I just got the call. They said it started in the basement. The basement. The ledger. The locked drawer. The evidence. I felt ice pour down my spine. "Where's Dad?" I asked. Silence. "Mom?" I pressed. "Where is he?" She didn't answer. And I knew. He was gone. They ruled the fire as suspicious. Investigators said it looked like an accelerant had been used, possibly gas or some kind of homemade explosive. It started in the basement, destroyed most of the structural support, and took the rest of the house with it. My mom moved in with my aunt. My dad disappeared. Vanished. No one had seen him. He didn't answer calls. His car was gone. His credit cards were no longer in use. It was like he evaporated. But he hadn't. Because 1 week later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name in his handwriting. Inside was a single piece of paper. Noah, you were always smart. Smarter than I gave you credit for. I told you the world is full of shadows, and you went looking for them anyway. I don't blame you, but I hope one day you understand why I did what I did. It wasn't greed. It wasn't power. It was control. The kind you need to survive in this world. The kind God forgot to give us. I'll be gone for a long time. Maybe forever. But part of me is proud of you. You broke the chain. That takes guts. Don't come looking for me. You won't like who I've become. Dad, I read it 10 times before I could speak. Then I tore it in half and threw it in the trash. But I couldn't throw the feeling away. The feeling that he wasn't sorry. That he still didn't get it. That he was still trying to justify the life he built on lies, manipulation, and faith he never truly lived by. The investigation moved quickly after the fire. The nonprofit had enough evidence to keep the case alive, even without the physical ledger. My digital files, backed up in 3 locations, became the backbone of the case. The FBI got involved. Quiet subpoenas were issued. The church board was questioned. Some resigned. Others lawyered up. Then came the biggest twist of all. My mom was arrested. Accessory to money laundering. Obstruction. Evidence tampering. Turns out she had known for years. Maybe not the full scope, but enough. Enough to confront him. Enough to stop it. But she never did. She claimed she was protecting the church. The community. Us. But all she really protected was his image. The perfect pastor. The perfect family. The perfect lie. I gave my full testimony in a sealed courtroom. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I talked about the phone. The ledger. The conversations. The fake sermons. I cried. I screamed. I broke down twice. But I did it. And after I walked out, I realized something. I wasn't doing this just for justice. I was doing it for me. For the kid I used to be. The one who believed in goodness. In honesty. In love that wasn't conditional. I didn't get closure in the traditional sense. My dad was never caught. Last I heard, he was possibly spotted crossing into Mexico under a different name. My mom was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. The church closed indefinitely. And me? I moved to a new city. Changed my last name. Started therapy. I'm not ashamed to say I broke down more times than I can count. But I also started to heal. I realized that faith doesn't have to come from someone else's words. Faith isn't in a pulpit, or a robe, or a rehearsed sermon. Faith is in the choices you make when no one is watching. It's in standing up for truth, even when it breaks your heart, even when it destroys your family. Maddie and I are still close. We don't talk about that night at the warehouse much, or the fire, or the trial. But sometimes, we just sit and breathe in the silence that isn't built on lies anymore. She said something to me recently that stuck. You don't have to be perfect, Noah. You just have to be real. So that's what I'm trying to be now. Real. Honest. Free. The truth shattered my family, but it gave me my life back. And that's a trait I'd make 1,000 times over.